In at number 10, we have the Castoroides. And the reason why I put this thing in this spot on the list, and actually the reason why it's just on the list, is it is one of the most insane wood gatherers out there. And before you get something like the chainsaw, this is pretty much your best option for wood gathering. And obviously you can go into beaver dams as well and raid wood out of them. But if you want consistent, reliable wood gathering, there really isn't a better creature than the Castoroides. And although you might say its saddle is a kind of non-beginner level one, but still ARC beginners can make their ways into level 50s and 60s and up to the 70s. I'm not going to go up to there. I'm going to put 59 as a max level, but this is mainly just targeted for new ARC players, other than just if you're just starting out on a map and you've played loads of ARC anyway, then you should know what to tame and be fine. But if you've never played the island before and you're just coming new on ASA, or you just like starting ARC, the Castoroides is a great creature to look up to and eventually tame, and it is a pretty good underwater creature too, although there are some better ones out there for some lower level saddles. Next up, we have got the Megalodon, and in my opinion, this is the best creature for early game ocean travel, as it isn't a particularly difficult one to tame, and quite a lot of the time you can find one glitched on the shore. I've done that actually quite recently. I tamed a Megalodon. It was like a level 150 something. I've got like really stupidly high levels, but that wasn't on my single player world. It was on a server. It was 156, so I'm pretty sure 180 was the max level on that server, and it was just stuck on the beach, and I just shot some tranks into it, and obviously then it knocks out. And they don't even need fish meat to be tamed. I'm not even sure if they can be tamed with fish meat. They must be able to be, but you can just tame them with normal meat and use prime meat as well. And I think you can use mutton too to tame these things really quickly, although I've never actually used mutton when tame one. I've used prime and normal. I never use fish meat when tame these things. They must eat it, but normal meat's easier to get your hands on, and they also deal the bleed ability and quite a significant amount of damage, and they're pretty fast as well. The only thing you have to watch out for is potentially a low stamina stat if you're going for a lower level, so make sure you don't drown, but overall pretty easy, very effective ocean tame. Next up, we got the Beals, and this has to be on the list, as if you didn't know already, cementing paste is an extremely useful resource in the ARC game. And this is one of those creatures which can gather loads of cementing paste by killing insects. And if you ever go to the insect cave in the redwoods, bring one of these things. Obviously, you might not be able to get the artifact, as there are just so many insects in there, but if you've got a high level Beals, you'll be able to get the artifact and loads of cementing paste on your way. And if you have a Megatherium, you can get loads of chitin too, and that is again another extremely useful resource. And you can even make cementing paste with chitin and stone in a mortar and pestle, but it is much easier to do it with the Beals here. And if you're looking for an underwater tame of sorts, this will be a great option and a better one than the Castoroides in my opinion, because it's faster. It can stick up some kind of fight, although maybe not the best kind of fight, but you know, it swims at a decent speed. You can get around to places quite easily. So for some maybe silica pole gathering in some of the underwater caves you'll find in the island, non-artifact ones of course, it can be a pretty useful creature. Next up, we got the Stegosaurus, and for a beginner, this is pretty much the best berry gatherer which you can physically get your hands on in the island. It is a pretty slow tame, so it's not too hard to knock out, and although on official it does take quite a significant amount of time to actually be tamed, you're probably going to be playing single player if you're just starting out, or maybe just choose a server with some higher rates, because it can take like a couple of hours to tame even a really low level one. But no one really goes with that anymore. It's a bit of an unnecessary point I made there, but still a very easy tame. They're pretty slow. Just feed them meadows. You don't need to feed them crops or kibble or anything. You're probably not at the stage of the game yet where you will do that, or even at this point know how to effectively do it. Even me right now, I've like basically never used kibble. I don't get into all of it. I'm a mutton kind of person, and I don't really grow vegetables either. Meadow berries is usually as far as I go. I've made sweet vegetable cake, obviously, for some tames, but you know, this doesn't need any of it. Just give it some meadows and you've got yourself an insane berry gatherer. If you're on a PvP server and you're thinking of raiding some bases too, it can be a useful creature to aid in that department, as well as they have a lot of damage reduction, again with their 3 plate modes. The sharpened plate is going to gather all your berries. The hardened plate, I think, is that the turret? It's either a turret soaking one, or it will, no, the hardened plate is the turret soaking one, and then the heavy plate will be used to gather things like wood and all that. So yeah, very useful creature for multiple playing styles. Next up, we've got the Raptor, but also in this spot, I'm going to check the Sarco as well. I don't have any B-roll for the Sarco, but you find that creature in the swamp. Their saddle's unlocked, and I think level 38, and they're a really good tame for underwater travel, and they deal quite a lot of damage. Definitely one that you should check out if you haven't already, because I know loads of you have been talking about the Sarco. So I wanted to give it a quick mention here to just say, I've heard you and I've not forgotten about it, and I do think it is a great beginner tame on the island. Just be careful, as they are quite quick, and you'll probably want to trap it in a 2x2 kind of stone trap. I'm not sure if they can break wood. No, I'm pretty sure they can break wood, but slowly you can probably get away with wood. Maybe go for stone if you've never done it before. Make a basic trap, lure it into it. Maybe try and find one that isn't in the swamp biome. If you go to I'm not really sure what it's called, but is it called like the Hidden Lake or something? Either way, in the north you'll kind of see a lake, which is actually pretty near where I recorded this B-roll for the Raptor, and you can sometimes find Sarkos in there. Going to the swamp biome as a beginner may not be your best bet. But either way, talking about the Raptor, this thing's saddle was unlocked at level 19, so you can get it really early on. It can be bowlered and tranked really easily, or even clubbed, or you can use a slingshot if you feel like that as well. So it's a much lower level tame in terms of resource compared to the Sarco, and they're pretty quick, although their weight isn't that great. You can obviously level it up, and you're probably not going to be doing metal runs or anything like that with these things. Wouldn't advise it, but just they are a really great carnivore for just getting you started in Ark, so I do think they have to be put on this list for that matter. In at number 5, we've got the Megatherium, and this creature is one which I talked about earlier, being an insane chitin gatherer, and that is partly why I put it here, but it is also an insanely great boss creature. And I was going to put the Thler on this list, although I thought that wasn't really a beginner tame, as its saddle level is just so high up, but I guess I'll mention it briefly. The Thler is just a great gatherer of all basic beginner resources, and it's great for the dragon boss fight, although you may not be thinking about that quite yet on the island at the stage that you are. But the Megatherium is one for the Broodmother, and the Broodmother is probably the first boss which you're going to do, or if you want the easiest one, go for the Megapithecus, although a Gamma Broodmother really isn't that bad. And Megatherium spawn everywhere, and they're not actually too bad to tame, and they're not just useful for boss fights. Again, they can gather insane amounts of chitin. That's also to see why they're so great at the Broodmother, not because they gather loads of chitin, but you will get loads of chitin from the Broodmother boss fight. It just has a very extreme buff when it kills an insect, and the Broodmother spawns as spider-like minions, and from that you can get the buff and then deal loads of damage to the Broodmother, which is why it's so useful. But it also acts as a pretty nice berry gatherer at this stage of the game. Again, very easy tame. Its saddle isn't too expensive, I'm pretty sure, and it's not unlocked at too late of a level, and it's so useful for a variety of things, mainly chitin gathering, but also bosses if you want to get into bosses in those gamma bosses in the early stages. Next up, we got the Pteranodon, and I had to put this down on the list, and I guess I'll mention the RG as well. Go for the RG if you can. You can make a very basic trap for it. Just you can use wood, 2 foundations, and then chuck in 8 door frames around it and chuck 2 ceilings on. You'll need to place those 2 extra door frames on once the RG's in the trap, and boom, knock it out. Easy RG tame like that. But the Pteranodon is probably the first flyer that you'll ever get on Ark, especially on the island. If it was Crystal Isles, then I'd probably say do some explorer runs and get a Crystal Wyvern. But the Pteranodon on most maps, obviously that support flyers, so not Operation and Gen 1, or Crystal Isles in my opinion, then you'll be getting this creature, and it is actually a pretty decent option for raids as well with that C spin attack. C is just the keybind for that attack. If you're a console player, that might not mean anything to you, but I just call it a C attack because that's the button. Either way, that's quite useful for PvP raiding, so if you're a PvP beginner, this could be a nice creature to window into that. Their saddle is relatively inexpensive, although the 25 chitin or keratin, you can get either. I would say chitin is easier, just kill some ants or a trilobite or something like that, and you'll get that. It's much easier than just farming loads of carb enemies and then getting all of the keratin that way. But, you know, it also just depends on what biome you are, what map you are, and where you've spawned, and actually what resource you have available to you. But they're a pretty fast flyer in the early game. They'll get you up in the air, which will severely speed up your progress. Although their weight and stamina aren't great, they can obviously be leveled, and if you tame a higher level one, which, you know, you'll probably do at some point, then that will obviously improve. And again, they can be bowlered really easily. If I haven't said that already, I don't know why I said again. They can be bowlered, they don't need to be trapped, and they can be very simply tranked, or you can use clubs, although a couple of trank arrows will do the job. In at number 3, we have the Thler, and I have to put this thing here, as it's one of the most mobile creatures on the island. And if you have access to the net projectile, you may not, doesn't matter, you can obviously tame this thing. It's basically the RG trap, which I mentioned, so 2 foundations of wooden foundations, of course. Then there's 8 door frames. You can place all of them down, you don't need to wait till it's lured in, and then just put 2 ramps on the outside and it'll do it. The only reason you need the ceilings there for the RG trap is because it flies. This thing doesn't fly, and as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't really jump that high in the wild. Pretty sure. I don't really see it do that in the wild. A tamed one could get out of the trap, but a wild one can't, and that kind of plays to your benefit, because once you tamed it, you can get out of the trap. Obviously, you can just destroy the trap as well. Either way, very, very simple tame, not too difficult to trap. Just be careful that it doesn't bite you. A Pteranodon can be great assistance into luring this thing into the trap as well, to stop that happening, as it has the bleed ability. If you're not well armored or well protected, then, you know, it may not offer the best kind of security for you, and you could end up dying. And considering that you'll be in the red ones on taming one of these things, you don't want to. Always, as a precaution, place some sleeping bags around the area that you'll be taming, so if all does go wrong, you can actually spawn back in. I know it may seem a bit overkill, but you can always just demolish them afterwards to get half of the resources back, or if your server or world allows, just pick them back up again. You really don't want to risk it too much. And once tamed, you got yourself an absolute beast of a creature, and they have to be mentioned on this list, as they really are some of the most insane small carnivores out there which you can find. In at number 2, we have the Bionics, and this is pretty much the best cave creature on the island. And considering caves is probably something which you may want to be doing at this stage, if you've obviously got to the stage of taming a Bionics, then this is going to be your best bet out there. They deal a very decent amount of damage, have a very decent amount of health, and their size is perfect enough that you can get into a cave and get out. And these things will help you so much for getting through the masses of Onyx, Pulmonoscorpius, and Araneos, and also Arthropleurus, which you'll find in caves, and sometimes even Megalanias if you do have those in the cave. Sometimes you don't always find those, and dung beetles as well, although you don't need to kill those things. They're literally some of the most passive creatures in the game. Mainly it's going to be Onyx, are going to be your biggest issue as they fly around, so they can kind of travel everywhere. But Titanoboas, which I didn't actually mention before, are going to be a huge issue too. But they're also really great for the underwater caves due to a right click spin attack, which can stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon, which as far as I'm concerned, no other Ark creature can do. And it kind of gives you a ticket out if you do need to take that. But overall, the best caving creature on the island. If you're thinking of doing caves, tame yourself a Bionics and then go into them. Unless it's the artifact of the Skylord, then this thing is just not going to fit. Now, controversial, I know, but in at number 1, I'm putting the Carno. And if you hate the Carno and you want to go for a Allo, then just pretend I'm talking about the Allosaurus here. Is that it's another great kind of beginner tame, and especially on ASA because they have those baby spawns. So if you're an Allo person, I'm talking about the Allo here. If you're a Carno person like me, I'm so strongly a Carno person. Unless it's SOTF actually, as I found out, then I will choose the Allo. But for general Ark, I always choose the Carno. My first reason for that is they're easier to tame as they don't spawn in packs. Then also, I know with the baby thing, they're kind of the same difficulty, although you'll still get packs of Allos, but then you can get more than one Allo in one go. Either way, yeah, they're smaller and so they don't spawn in packs, and the size actually does play to a benefit. It doesn't make them easier to tame, it makes them kind of easier to trap, if you don't need to build such a large trap to put them in, especially if you're taming more than one at the same time. In the case of allos, they're not as fast as the allo, but I prefer the smaller size. For some reason it makes me feel safer, and even if you do tame one of these things and you're not high enough level for the saddle to be unlocked, you can still have it just following around you if you're going up to the mountains to get some metal, as they do deal a bleed ability as well. That is right click instead of the left click, which won't deal any bleed damage. And unlike the allo, they don't, unlike the allo, they don't have the pack buff, which the Allosaurus does. But I don't think it is really necessary for one of your first big carnivores, and I can't urge it enough. This is one of the best, if not the best, in my opinion. It is the best beginner tame on the island. But, you know, if you really hate this decision, just go for an allo, I guess. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I hope you enjoyed this one. And as always, comment down below, what is your favorite beginner tame on the island, and also did you agree with this list? And with that, I will see you all later.